Welcome to Corralling the Chaos podcast, where we talk publicly about the things you're worried about privately. My name is Angela Leah, and I'm your host. This is the event industry podcast for companies and crew, where we're going to dive deep into things like, what does our industry need that it just doesn't have? What are the things you want to know, but you're just too afraid to ask? And what are the biggest opportunities ahead for our industry? We're going to go deep, and nothing is off limits. Welcome back to another episode of Corralling the Chaos. Today, I have a very special guest with me, Nicole Carson from Warner Music Group. And Nicole Carson, if you don't know her, you're about to get to know her, is an event professional who has worked in entertainment for almost 20 years. Born and raised in the Bay Area, she moved to LA 18 years ago and immediately started working in the music industry, starting out at record labels and slowly moving into venues and live events. She has worked on a multitude of large-scale productions and produced events within music, sports, live TV, and at many different venues around Southern California. Her titles range from being a production manager, tour manager, festival producer, and currently she acts as the director of event production at Warner Music Group. She's also passionate about mentorships in our industry and being an advocate for the future generation of event professionals. She's currently a senior mentor at WMG and a mentor moderator for a handful of other small nonprofits such as Live Out Live and Diversify the Stage. Also a fun fact, which we are definitely going to dive into, Nicole is a opera-trained rock singer and has been a singer since the first grade. She currently performs with a metal band and a rock cover band. So Nicole,
True.
you know we want to
All
start
true.
there. We are absolutely going to start there. What does it mean to be an opera-trained rock star singer?
It definitely does not make any sense. I know. You're like, what does this mean? So first of all, though, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be speaking with you. I love podcasts. I love speaking about my this crazy world I've been in and just like hearing from other people. I love it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
Yeah, so I started singing in the first grade in the choir, and my dad's side of the family is music. They're all music people. My grandfather was like a classically trained pianist. My great grandmother was an opera singer. I have ballerinas and dancers in my family, so it's very like musical.
All sorts of performers.
And so my dad, growing up, he's a doctor, but he always knew like the family had this musical background, and I started singing and playing piano when I was still little, and he said, "Oh, maybe there's something here, right?" So I just kept singing throughout like middle school and then high school, and then I got into opera in high school, and I was like doing sports and singing. So I would go from like volleyball practice to like a 2-hour opera training after school. It was like crazy.
You don't hear that much.
No, it was weird.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Like I didn't have a social life, like social life.
Yeah.
Like my social life was like music and then sports. So I started doing opera and I really loved it. And I was like really good at it. And the reason I moved to LA was because I got a scholarship at Long Beach State. When I first moved here, it was an opera scholarship. So that's what brought me down here.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just kept singing, and like I stayed there for a couple of years, and I was like, you know what, like opera's cool, but I want to sing like rock. I want to sing like, because I love punk rock. I grew up with listening to classic rock and punk rock and metal. And I was like,
who's your favorite band? Who's your favorite band right now?
Right now, I mean, I love Iron Maiden right now. I'm like on a kick.
You
and
are hardcore.
I just got done working. I was at a festival this past weekend, and Foo Fighters were there, and like Avenged Sevenfold was there, and all these heavier bands were there. So it was like I love so many different bands, but I'm like on a Maiden kick right now, because he's actually classically trained as well, and a lot of people don't realize like there's a lot of similarities.
I just wish I could carry a tune. I don't even, when you say classically trained, like that's so foreign to me. I've always envied people who can carry a note much less, you're talking about being classically trained and, you can do all these different genres. I just
Don't
know
you worry.
the
I will
world
share.
envies people who can sing.
I'm gonna share links with you after this is over. Don't you
That's
worry.
awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
But yeah, I mean, I just and now I have a metal band. I actually do a lot of like screaming in this band. It's like metalcore. So I sing and I do some screaming in it, which people were like, that's scary. And then I have a cover band. We do like punk and grunge rock and 90s rock. And I've done a lot of singing throughout the last like 20 years.
Yeah.
And so it's like, but it helps, right? With this conversation, it's like being being somewhat of an artist and then you work with artists, it's like it's helps you see a whole different side of what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, what you do is there's more to balance, right? Like, I mean, I know you've done corporate, I know you've done festivals, and now you're kind of focused on, the music side of it. And so it's not just entertaining and making sure the attendees have a great experience. You've got to focus on the artist and what's their experience. So walk us through what is unique about producing a musical event versus the festivals, corporate events, other things that you've done. What makes it unique and different?
You know what? It's like I I love the end result of a festival or music, like anything with music. It's like because music is this universal language. So you get people flying in from all over the world to be in one place with all these different people, and you're smiling and you're laughing and you're crying maybe, and you're headbanging or you're just like listening and you're it's very emotional.
Hmm.
So like for me, like, music is such a powerful tool. So when you get all these people together and you know you were part of that
Yeah.
experience, it's beautiful. It's
Yeah.
like this beautiful euphoric experience.
Talk to us about how planning for a musical event is different than how teams that you've been on in the past would plan a corporate event. How does that process look different?
Yeah. So like even right now, with Warner, it's a lot more of a it's corporate, so I'm doing town halls and things like that. It's just like the magnitude is different. Like if I'm doing a festival, you're preparing like half a year or more in advance and you're doing bids with vendors for staging and crewing and like building this rigging and like working with security and law enforcement, right?
Yeah,
It's like it's so safety is always important.
sure.
Always. I don't care what people say. It's my number one priority is the safety
Mhm.
of everybody. But when you're working with PD and fire departments and OSHA for compliance and a different scale than I would for a conference
Mhm.
or something. It's just I'm doing this maybe I can advance within 2 weeks to a month,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
A conference, depending on the client, right? If it's offsite, if it's on-site, am I doing rentals for chairs and tables and gear and bringing in a smaller crew? Like, festivals, you have multiple front of house operators, lighting designers, you have riggers, you have stage managers. I might hire a front of house operator and a lighting designer and a production manager, maybe an A2 for
Mhm.
my stuff. So it's smaller scale, but
Yeah.
it's still the same.
Yeah.
Like it's still the same checklist of things, it's
Yeah,
just not
just a
as
smaller
big.
scale. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, walk us through your process when you walk into a venue. It's kinda like your blank slate, right? What kinda information are you taking in? What are you looking
Oh,
for?
I
Like,
love it.
walk us through where your mind goes and what that process looks like.
I love it. I love looking at, like, blank land and just, like, knowing it's gonna be something awesome. It's, like,
Mhm.
my favorite thing because I do a lot of consulting still with festivals, like, still, and, like, it's I love it because you walk into a site and it's almost like, okay, if it's a new site, when you do things that you've done for years and years and years, you kinda know how it's gonna be laid out. You don't change anything. It's like, it works and you keep it that way. But if it's a new say you're like a new festival or someone brings me in to consult on things and find gaps or like area of opportunity, it's like, okay, here's my layout. I have like usually a CAD person or someone
Mhm.
that like is helping me do AutoCAD or something. Okay, how is this going to be laid out? I look at things like where are the egress and entry, like entry, egress points going to be? How am I going to set up an infrastructure, right? So I always start out and I work in. So it's like, how big is my perimeter?
Mhm.
Like you'll hear that, right? Like your perimeter. So your fence line, where am I going to be? Like, where is my festival
Yeah.
footprint?
Yeah.
Where is the footprint first? And then I kind of start to work into it because to me, where's my parking lot? Is there going to be areas for pickup and drop off for like transportation for people and ride share?
Mhm.
So I look at all that, the external things first, the exterior operations, we call it, right? I know people are probably going to nerd out over that. Like, oh, I love these terms because it's so nerd. I love it. Your exterior, your exterior operations, right? I was like, how many stages are we going to have? Okay, well, they want 3 stages. Okay, great. Well, because of the way sound carries, you can't put certain stages in certain areas because if they face each other, it's going to be it's like a conflict, right? So you have to consider how your stage is going to be laid out. And so you see, okay, what space do I have to work with? How can I place things? You got to consider water stations, like water sourcing. If the venue doesn't have water, how am I going to provide water? Where are the water lines?
Mhm.
Where am I going to drop power? It's like all these things you're kind of like just thinking through,
Yeah.
but you have to go kind of one at a time. It's
Yeah.
like, depending on even how the festival was pitched and what's promised to sponsorship, marketing,
Mhm.
who are your vendors going to be? So like you have to make sure you have room to place like, right, you have a sponsor here, you have a sponsor here, and you have
Yeah.
activation over here and over here. Your back of house. Do you have enough area space for your back of house, your artist green rooms? What's your transportation route for artists? Like I went to this one site and it was like, how am I going to move artists from over here to over here? It was like impossible. And it's just, you have to think about those things when you're there. It's like, how are we going to do this?
So what do you use to manage the project, build the project, keep yourself organized, check off things that are done? Like what tools do you use to
Oh
kind of
man.
manage all of that?
I mean, there's like, with festivals, like Festival Pro, like Airtable, I've used a lot. And these are just things I've used before,
Mhm.
Airtable. I know Lasso I used for crewing before
Mhm.
at another
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. Um, People are still using like live spreadsheets,
Yeah.
which I've used and like it's not great,
Yeah.
but it's
It's
doable,
what
right?
people know though.
It's what people use. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I've actually been using the last few festivals I've done has been through live documents, like live spreadsheets and Airtable.
Yep.
Airtable's fine. It's just hard when there's because there's so many departments for a festival. And if you're the one person in charge of every department, it can get really hard because people then do sidebar Airtable links here and here, and then it gets out of
Yeah.
control.
Yeah, it's not centralized
So
anymore for one.
it's
Yeah.
not, and that's the thing. It's like there's so many softwares, but I feel like there's not really one software that's a universal, unified. This is the one we should all use as festival or
Mhm.
event professionals,
Yeah.
right? Festival Pro, I like a lot. I find myself doing checklists a lot. So I make checklists for everyone. I do event notes, a lot of event notes for people. So my event notes have deadlines, they have check boxes, they have things. So like, because for me, I try and make it simplified for people
Yeah.
because not everyone thinks like me,
Right.
or like you or anybody.
Yeah, you
It's
gotta
like,
go meet them where they are, right?
yeah. So if I'm like, okay, security needs this. Okay, my production manager needs to fulfill this by this time.
Mhm.
I give them checklists and deadlines. And then we do weekly check-ins. I like to do weekly check-ins with all the like leads
Mhm.
and say, okay, where are we at?
Yeah.
Like I go through every department and I
Yeah.
say, where is this at? Where is this at?
Yeah.
And that's like to me the best way to do a
Yeah.
bigger event is like weekly check-ins with your
Yeah.
team
Yeah. Are
to
there
make sure that
any,
they're
as you think about all the planning, are there any non-negotiables that you have when it comes to planning? Like you'd mentioned safety, which I love. That's near and dear to my heart. I love that. I wish more companies were focused on the
yeah,
safety of their people and their attendees, and I think sometimes it's an afterthought.
yep.
But what are the other non-negotiables that you might have?
Yeah, no safety for sure. Satisfaction of your artists and your guests are really important. Like you don't have an event if your client isn't happy and if your guests aren't happy. Because all that does is create more work for you
Mhm.
if you're getting complaint
Yep.
after complaint after complaint. So for me, a non-negotiable is like client and guest satisfaction
Okay.
and employee wellness. I'm a really big advocate for employee wellness. And I know like when I was like going through all the podcast, the questions, I was like, oh man, this is really hard because there's so many things. It's like, if my people aren't happy, I'm not happy.
Well,
I
things
have
fall
to
apart,
keep,
right? If you don't have a happy crew that's
yes,
engaged and has a vested
yes,
interest in the success of the artist, the success of the festival, things begin to fall apart.
yes. And that reflects on the brand. It reflects on the artist because then the artists they feel that. People feel it. When you're back at house at a big event, you're feeling all the energy.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's the artist or a crew member,
Yeah.
you know? So I need to make sure my people are happy. I don't want you sleeping 2 hours a night for a 6-week, period of time.
Yeah.
I don't want that.
Yeah.
Like, go cut it off at some point, sleep a little bit, feel good about, go do meditation, go do some exercise. Like, it's really hard because part of what I notice is it's always like go, 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 right? Which is, yes, it's a very busy business. That doesn't mean you sacrifice taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a non-negotiable. It's like, I need to take care of myself and make sure my people are taken care of
Yeah.
because then I don't have a good outcome.
Well, you had mentioned that before, when we had asked, what's one of your biggest frustrations? You talked about like high burnout, right? Low budgets equal high burnout. And
Yeah.
so how do we go about educating our clients on what it really takes, right? Sure, you can do it for a low budget, but it's going to have implications, right? That maybe
Yeah.
the experience isn't the same. Maybe people aren't happy when
Mhm.
they're showing up. Maybe the artists, don't have a great experience. There's so many different things that go along with a low budget. So what do you do to educate your clients on a realistic budget so you don't have
Yeah.
a low budget high burnout rate?
What the problem is too with that is like when you deliver a great product with a shoestring budget, it's like, oh, they can get it done. It's fine.
I
It's
say that all the time. Our industry does not help ourselves. We keep doing
no.
these incredible, over the top, epic, magical experiences. I'm going to say within the client's budget, it's not. It's just not. Somebody eats that, right? Somebody is paying the price and the delta, and the clients don't know that. I think the really good companies are pushing back and saying, "Look, anything's possible. It's just going to cost you, right? You can have option 1, 2, or 3. Here's the
Yes.
different options."
Yes.
But so many companies are doing our industry a disservice, themselves a disservice because they just and I love it because it comes from a great place. The intention is so pure because you want to do a good job, but don't sell yourself short. And
Yeah.
so, how do we go about educating clients on what it really takes?
Yeah. What you said is like, yes, 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 and yes. So for me, like after every event I always do like an after action review. So I'm always documenting everything.
Hmm.
Like what can be better here? How can we improve here? And so like I'll do a postmort. We call it like a postmortem, right? With your team. So it's like, okay, everyone take notes, bring all your notes together. I'm going to compile one document of everything. And then it's my responsibility to go to like leadership or to go to whoever, right? And like say, hey, let's talk about this because
Hmm.
the next time you pitch this festival or this event to that person because of inflation,
Yeah.
because of maybe like low satisfaction from your team, like you're going to need to just kind of like tell them, okay, well, to do this again this year, this is what it's going to cost.
How far off do you think these clients' budgets are with what they're asking for? Like, what are you typically seeing? Hey, I need you to do X for Y. What is that delta typically that you're
It's
seeing and
like,
what they should be paying versus what their expectations are?
what's fun? I just had this conversation recently, actually, because I did work a festival recently that I come in and I do a lot of the artist relation side of it. And I'm just going to speak generally, but like I came in and it was like nothing that I had asked for in the advance was done. I didn't have what I needed. I had to go steal AstroTurf from the festival site. I had to go take decor from another because I didn't get it was so low budget, we say, right? I'm like, give me like $50,000. Give me
Yeah.
$20,000. I
Yeah.
will work with whatever I could get,
Yeah.
you know? Like if you just put in that extra 10, 20, 30 grand just for some extra turf, some extra decor, maybe some string lights or just something simple. I'm just talking general.
Yeah.
Like it makes a difference
Yeah.
because the artist experience has to be a priority.
Yeah.
And
The aesthetics
I
are important. Yeah.
it's
And
so
vibe
like,
and
it's so important. Like if you have a A-list artist, like this was a big artist. I won't say but it was a big artist coming in. And if I hadn't have scrambled and worked overnight to make this happen, they would have been like, this is,
budget.
this looks kind of a, and then what do I have to say? Yeah, my
Yeah.
budget's low. Like,
Yeah.
no, I'm not gonna, you
Yeah.
don't do that.
Right.
Like you don't say that.
Yes.
So for me, it's like putting in that extra, whether it's like 10 grand or maybe it's a 50,000, I don't, whatever it is,
Yeah.
whatever is the missing pieces.
Yeah.
I understand budget. I do. I manage budgets. I get it. But budget versus the experience
Yeah.
and making artists want to come back because artists talk, guests talk.
Yeah.
People talk on social media.
Mhm.
They're going to say that festival kind of was not great.
Mhm.
It didn't feel safe. Or, yeah, no, I'm an artist talking to some other big artists and you don't want to do that festival. It just wasn't a good experience.
It
Like
was low budget.
that's the last thing you want,
Yeah.
Oh my God, that like makes me scared.
Yeah.
Like to
Yeah.
have that.
Yeah. No, that makes
know?
sense. That makes sense. Well, when you think about your 20 years in the industry, what's something that you can think of that's always been done that way that you think it's time for us to reevaluate?
I remember doing this question and I had to think about it because for me, and I know I wrote this on the thing, it wasn't really a thing. It's more of like an attitude or like an approach.
Mhm.
It's like when I started to now, we need to really understand how we are approaching people in the business. Every client is different. Everyone you work with is different. You can't approach people in the same way. When it comes to new junior I have a lot of mentees I mentor and like coordinators, executive assistants, PAs, production assistants, interns. We can't treat these people just because they're new and they're young and they don't know what they're doing. You can't like degrade them or condescend them. And I see it all the time and it drives me crazy because how are we helping our future generation with this attitude that's like, well, this is just how it is and this is how the business is and the music industry is a tough business. Like, yeah, it is, but it's our job to educate and to change that attitude a little
Teach, be
bit.
kind. Yes.
Be kind and teach. And that's why I'm a big advocate for women in entertainment. And I'm also an advocate for like trying to educate these young professionals who are like just starting out, like USC Business School. We have a lot of interns here that come from USC. They're in music business. This is their internship. And, I see them all the time and they come to my events here and they're like, this is awesome. I'm like, yeah, like if you ever want to come and just watch how we advance things and produce it, like, let me know. Like, oh my God, that's so awesome. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. That means a lot.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to be an a-hole.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
it's
I'm
like
just gonna
everyone
say
should
it.
remember they started somewhere too, right? And it's having those people around you that are willing to put their arm around you and say, I got you. I'm going to teach
That's
you.
what it
And
is.
you're going to make mistakes and it's
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
And there's
But
not enough of that.
There's not. And that's what it bothered me because like I've been treated that way. Like I've been in some roles before, like as a manager or like a senior manager level where I'm being treated like I don't know anything and I'm, being micromanaged. And it's just like it's not the right approach that we need to take moving forward. And because this industry is evolving, technology is evolving, there's a lot going on, like with live streaming, with live events, with physical events, virtual events. We need to teach people what these things mean
Yeah.
and be nice about it
Yeah.
and not be like, well, you don't know anything, so I don't want to work with you.
Yeah.
Like I was just mentoring somebody the other week and they were like, I was on this tour as a PA with my first tour ever. And I had to leave after a couple weeks because I was treated so badly and they were so mean to me. And it's a female in a male driven camp.
Yeah.
And she's like, I couldn't take it anymore. I'm like, that is sad.
Yeah.
That makes me so sad. How do we change that?
Yeah, we
You
talk
know?
about it a lot on this show, and I think we have an opportunity to create a safe landing place. Because I mean, you just mentioned it, right? So many people are going to school to study what we're doing, and then they graduate, and let's face it, our industry is full of freelance. That's
Mhm.
what so much I mean, it's project-based gig work, right? And they go learn one thing and then they go to the next and it's gig to gig to gig, right? And which means there's nobody, there's no sense of ownership, there's no sense of loyalty, there's no sense of investment of, hey, I'm going to invest in these people. But I mean, let's face it, just a couple years ago, we were dealing with 38% of our industry gone, poof. And we were begging for people to come join.
Yep.
And now that things are turning, let's not forget where we were. Let's
Right.
treat these people,
Right.
let's give these people who have raised their hand and said, "Hey, I think that's a really cool industry and I have something to offer. I have something to give." Well, let's welcome them. Let's give them a good landing place, a good place to start a career, not a job, a career,
Right.
passion, because
Yes.
it is a
Yes.
passion for these people. You
Yes.
don't work the hours you do. You talked about staying up all night because you were going to make sure this thing went off well and that you were proud of it because you cared. That's not a job. That's a passion, right? That's a career. That's something you want to do. That's not a 9 to 5 job, collect a paycheck. And that's why
Yes.
people come to our industry because they're passionate about it. They're not
Yeah.
looking for a 9 to 5 job. They want to do something. They
Exactly.
want to
Exactly.
create. They want to make an impact. And I just think our industry needs to remember we need to give these people a good landing place and create a good career where they want to stay and stop treating them like freelancers.
Yeah, I love that. You just said that so well. Yes, this is not your normal 9 to 5 office job,
Yeah.
right? You don't go on the road for 3, 4 weeks at a time, work 18 hours a day, stay up all night.
Right.
Like you don't do that type of work if you're not passionate about it and you
Yeah.
don't love it. And
You're
creating, like
all
you
in.
said,
Yeah.
creating that experience that people go, wow, that is awesome. You don't this isn't like that. Exactly. But the problem too is like it creates some people who are so like they're so bitter or they've been in it so long.
They got a chip on
They
their shoulders, what I always say. Like,
yeah,
get
they
rid of
have a
the
chip
chip.
on their shoulder. But it's like, then maybe move on.
Mhm.
Or don't rub that off on everyone else.
Yeah. That's
That's
right.
it's just how do we like, us who we're trying to make an impact with podcasts and like speaking,
Mhm.
how can we have an impact on that part of it and like
Yeah.
create more of a healthy, welcoming, positive environment for these
Yeah.
newer people
That's
to
right.
come in,
That's
right?
right. Well, I mean, the more I talk to people, I think we all recognize it's a problem, and I think, I mean, I see things changing. I think more and more people are tired of getting a bad rap for those that walk around with a chip on their shoulder, the people that have been doing this 40 years. Maybe it is time to move on. I don't know, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
but there's also some new people that have chips on their shoulders, but it's not just indicative of the time you've spent in the industry, but I think more and more people are becoming less tolerant of that. We had a guest on our show and he called those types of people terrorists. He's like, they're terrorists. They're hijacking your business, right? And we all just bend to them because they're highly technical, they're brilliant, yet they're nasty at the job site. They are not a good, representation of your brand. Like, who cares? Get rid of them. Who cares how
Get
great they
rid
are
of them.
technically?
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
I just, I see more and more people willing to go there and have the courage to act on it. And
Mhm.
so, I do see that changing slowly but surely, for
Yeah.
sure.
You have to say it. We
Yeah.
can't like we can't not bring it up. Like
Yeah.
things like this, you have to just like say it and verbalize it.
Yeah. Call it what it is.
Because I'm very direct. I just call it out for
Yeah.
what things are. Like, you have to
Yeah.
call it out. Like, people's attitudes are not, they suck. They suck sometimes. And when you're on site and you're like, that person is soul sucking. They're energy draining.
Yeah.
And then an artist comes to you for something and they're just being bitter.
Mhm.
It's like, and you have to place people where they belong. Like,
Right.
I have to move. I've had to move people from one post to another sometimes because, or I'd go to like the supervisor and say, hey, that person can't be there.
Yeah.
I had to do that a lot
Yeah.
because they're just not meant to be there. They're like their attitude,
Yeah.
or they're not professional,
Yeah.
or they just want to like googly eye over an artist. It's like you can't do that. That's not professional behavior,
Yep.
you
We're getting
know?
there. We're getting there as an industry. Well, I
I
always
think so.
yes, I think so too. Well, I always like to ask my guests before we wrap up one final question, and that is, what do you hope for our industry?
This is a hard question because there's a lot, right?
Yeah.
We hope for evolution. We hope for improvement in just like, yeah, like I mean, for me, it's like softwares, evolution with technology and evolving with where the industry is going. Like when I say what I hope for, I'm always thinking like, I would love to have, like we talked about, budget, process. Like if you're making the same mistakes at every festival, every big event, or every production, and you're not learning from your past notes, your past after actions, your postmorts, you're just doing the same thing every time. How are we evolving?
Yeah.
How are we becoming a better brand?
Mhm.
Like I see it sometimes. There's certain festivals I've done a lot every year, and I'm like, why are we doing the same mistakes every time?
Yeah. It's like rinse
And
and
so,
repeat, rinse and repeat. Yeah.
and it's like, it's bothersome. It's like we're not doing ourselves a favor.
Yeah.
So I want, like for me, it's like I want us to learn from these things and actually put into action all of these things that we're trying to make better, a better experience for people. Live streaming now is a huge thing. I have a lot of companies now come in and do video and live streaming for bigger productions. It's like, how are we evolving? Are we really doing our due diligence as a this global unified,
Mhm.
business to connect artists and fans from Europe, from Asia, you know, from like South America? How are we connecting everybody into
Yeah.
one, right? Music, festivals, production. It's like I see it all the time. It's like, well, this is being live streamed, but only to certain areas,
Yeah.
right? Only to certain people. It's like, why?
Yeah.
We're missing half of our demographic by
Yeah.
not pushing this out. So I feel like we're with the times, but we're not.
Right.
We're moving slower than we need to be
Yeah.
on the technology side, especially with COVID. Like, obviously, COVID opened up this whole new world of like, live streaming and virtual events. And like, I'm still learning a lot about that part of it too. It's because I only came up with physical events. So now that I'm doing more virtual things, it's like this whole new world of like learning about this. But like, are we moving at the right pace we should be where like
And
technology
how
is
do we get our
growing?
clients to evolve at the same speed with what's possible?
And that's it too, is like,
Yeah.
because that costs money.
Yes, that's right.
That costs money and that takes time because they don't know. It's our job to educate clients.
Yeah.
They don't know, like, well, if you pay $50,000 more, you'll get this much more. You'll reach this many more viewers. You can connect with people who watch a show here in California, but maybe people in Europe can be watching it too, you know? But like, how do we pitch that? It's always my thing. It's like, I want to find a real way that we can just pitch these things, not make the same mistakes over and over,
Yeah.
truly listen to ourselves. Like, here's a list of all these things we need to fix. I call them areas of opportunity, right?
Mhm.
Stop making the same mistakes at the next one.
Yeah.
Put the money in, put in
Yeah.
the resources, hire a consultant,
Yeah.
hire professionals in each of these areas to help you and guide you to create a safer experience, a more well-rounded experience for everybody,
Yeah.
and like, yeah, this whole like, what do you hope for? It's just like, I want us to, I want the industry to evolve as we should be evolving. Like, it's just, I feel like we're kind of behind.
We are.
I
We
feel like we're
absolutely
behind.
are. Yeah.
COVID did not help.
Well,
you know,
in some ways it did. It shook up a lot of things,
it
right?
shook
It
it
kind of
up.
turned it
Yeah.
upside down, and in some ways things are settling back to the way they were, which is not
Sure.
good. And
Sure.
in other ways, things are completely different than they were, And so I think we're still early on that road of evolution and getting our clients to think differently. Hey, because just because you spent, 300,000 on something last year, guess what? Inflation alone, it doesn't
Yeah.
cost 300,000 this year,
Yep.
It even
Yeah.
more to do less than what you did last year. And I think,
More to do
people have
less.
to have the
Yeah.
courage to say those things, to make strong recommendations, to lead their clients versus I'm going to take whatever budget they give me and I'm going to work within that versus knowing when to make strong recommendations, right? Because I think our industry forgets because there's such talented people. I just did a LinkedIn post on this earlier. Everyone is so talented and we're so used to being behind the curtain. We don't do a good job bragging on what we've done. We don't do a good job really explaining the stakes and how high they are and the risk for mishaps. And this could happen. And what's the implication of that? We spend
Yep.
so few uh, minutes and time with our customers talking about those because we're focused on how are we going to deliver a great experience within this budget
Mhm.
rather
I
than
agree.
how
Yeah.
do we
Yeah.
educate them on
Yeah.
a more accurate budget, right? And
Yeah.
push and pull on things like it's our job to keep them from making mistakes. And I think we forget that sometimes
Yes.
because we're so focused on creating that I think it's an opportunity. We don't do a good job bragging.
No, you're right. You're right. Like you said something and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's like such a good point." Like I came into a festival recently where they didn't have a standard operating procedure. They didn't have a manual for like an EAP or like just a manual, like a guide of like process. So I had to like create this whole guide of like here's an SOP for this, here's an
Yeah,
SOP for this. Like people don't think about that sometimes. It's
right.
like, have an operating manual. Do you have a voice of God? Do you have, like, do you have an evacuation procedure? Like, I'm thinking of all these things, and it's like, oh, no, no, or like maybe they do, but it's not complete. It's not fully like built out. It's like, how can you run an event, a big event with things like gaps like this, right? And well, we don't have the money to hire this person, or we don't. Those are the things. It's like, okay,
Yes.
this has to change because that will affect
There's that non-negotiable we
everything.
talked about, right? Yeah,
Non-negotiables. Yeah.
that's right.
Yes.
Well, lots
Totally.
of good stuff here. I mean, a couple takeaways that I have from this is um musical events, they're a little bit different, right? You've got not just the audience experience, but you're also
Mhm.
managing and balancing that with the artist experience. You talked about a lot of non-negotiables, safety being a huge part of it. You talked about burnout within the crew. Talked about budgets, the industry evolving, and then my favorite, just a reminder to everybody: be kinder to those that are maybe newer to the industry, or maybe those that aren't newer. Right? It's you don't pick and choose who you're kind to. Just be kind. Remember, everyone's choosing to be there. Everyone's tired. Everyone's passionate about a great outcome. So maybe extend a little bit more grace. So hopefully that's a takeaway for all of you as well. And I'm super grateful to have you on the show, Nicole. And thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, one team, one dream. I always say it.
Love it.
One team, one dream, right? We're all in this together.
That's
Doesn't
right.
matter if it's an up and coming artist or an executive of a label or whoever this. Be kind, listen, and if you can't say yes, provide an alternative. That's my last thing. It's like I always if I can't say no, it's like, well, that might not be possible, but here's an alternative. Always provide another solution.
Options are good. Always
Options.
good. I love it. Well, thank you again, Nicole. And thank you, everybody, for listening. If you like what you hear, don't forget to hit subscribe. And if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, reach out to us at podcast@lasso.io. Thanks, everybody.